Hey guys, so for those of you who are not aware, there was an article that was recently published on military.com that tore into and criticized myself and Campbell County Militia. For those of you who don't know, my name's Dan Abbott, and I'm the commander with Campbell County Militia. And that's generated a whole bunch of attention and questions as far as what is a militia, a constitutional militia, how does it function, what does it do, all that kind of stuff. And we're noticing that a lot of those questions are repeat questions that we're fielding kind of over and over and over again. So we wanted to kind of use like a panel type forum where we could answer some of those questions that we're seeing repeated and try to get you guys answers for them so that you don't have to keep asking the same questions over and over again. So I've got a couple of my guys here, and we're going to introduce ourselves and try to answer some questions. So Marty, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Marty White from the Appomattox County Militia, right next door, and excited to answer some questions. Let's get into it.
I like how he didn't even wait for me to finish asking him to introduce himself. He just started talking over me.
So fucking ready.
All right, awesome.
But that's Marty White. And Justin, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Justin Carwell. I'm with Campbell County Militia since the original muster in 2020, and I also serve on the Campbell County Board of Supervisors since I was elected in 2021.
Can we clap in this?
No.
You can clap for me anytime you want.
And so Justin has gotten written down a bunch of our most commonly asked questions, and so I'm going to have him kind of work through that list, and we'll try to collectively answer them as best we can.
Yeah, so these are questions that have been taken from chats, forums, everywhere that this issue is getting discussed, and so we've got a handful of questions that have been repeat, just continually showing up everywhere. So let's start off with the legalities around a militia, and are militias legal, and how do I check what my individual state's regulations and rules are on something like that?
Yeah, we do get asked that a lot. There's federal law, of course, that defines militia. You can find that in U.S. Title 10, and of course the second half of the Second Amendment is pretty clear that militia is designed to be made up of the whole body of the people. U.S. Title 10 says the same thing, and actually I believe it defines it as 18 to 45. But also individually, every state has some variety of militia laws. Some of them are very, very specific. Others are kind of broad and open-ended. You can find that by just Googling it. If you Google whatever your state is in militia, especially on a .gov website, you will find militia law in your state. If you're unable to find it, or you're having trouble sourcing it, or you're like me and you're just unfriendly to technology, you can reach out to us. My wife actually built a spreadsheet where she researched the code sections and laws and constitutions for every state in the Union and found what their militia laws are by state, and it's got it all broken down. So if you're having trouble finding it, you can absolutely reach out to us, and we will be happy to supply that.
We'll just say on that, are you aware off the top of your head of any state that outright just militia is not a thing, we don't do that here? Like, I can't imagine there really is.
Well, there are no states that have laws that say we don't have or can't have militia here. There are some states that just leave it very kind of vague and open-ended, and will say stuff like, the militia in the state is made up of all able-bodied persons. And it's just kind of really vague and open-ended.
So you can actually look back at history and see militia law and practice predating our nation.
Yeah, I think the first militia charter was in Massachusetts, and it was enacted like 2 years after the landing at Plymouth, because they pretty much immediately recognized, wait a minute, we need some type of military culture here. We need some type of community or corporate defense.
So the next question is, what is the difference between an organized and unorganized militia in the frame of how the Second Amendment states it?
Right. So we get asked that all the time, because it's like everybody thinks like, okay, well, we're defined as unorganized militia. We're the whole body of the people, males ages 16 to 55 trained to arms, which is coming right out of Virginia Code Section 44-1. And it's like, okay, well, if you're the unorganized militia, well, now you're organized. You've got rank structure, and you've got a chain of command, and you've got standards and all this stuff. Well, now you're not an organized militia. Well, that's not the reality. And in order to understand why those terms are used, we need to look at them in historical context and figure out where the terms organized and unorganized came from and why those terms are used. And if you look back in history, fairly early on in the new nation, actually predating the new nation, we had laws on the books, and a lot of those are actually still on the books, that require membership in militia. It's part of your civic duty to be part of society. Is you are a member of the militia. And shortly after the nation was formed, it was like those laws were sort of no longer enforced. It was like, well, everybody's part of the militia, but they're not really training, they're not really doing anything. And so what you had is these independent companies that were standing up and going, no, you know what? Yeah, we get that everybody's part of this, but we're going to take this seriously. We're going to buy our own equipment. We're going to buy our, we're going to have our own rank and command structure. We're going to do training on our own time. We're going to finance ourselves. And so those militias were much better equipped, but they weren't necessarily part of the state or government militia. And so, like everything else that government does, they try to take the better word and apply it to themselves and treat everyone else like they're a rabble. So the reality was that the unorganized militias were much better equipped and much better trained and were at a much higher state of readiness than the organized militia, which were the government militias that didn't really train, weren't really funded because government didn't have the money to fund them, quite honestly. And so that has kind of stayed through today, where the organizations that are entirely volunteer, are staffed by volunteers, paid for by volunteers, are unorganized militia, and the organizations, i.e. National Guard, that are state-funded militia are the organized component of the militia. I think that pretty much covers that. It sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but when you understand the historical context, it does actually make sense.
Yeah, I mean, while having someone else buying all of the equipment that we use would certainly be nice, I think most folks will agree that when it comes to mil spec versus what's available on the civilian market, in a lot of cases we actually end up with some generally better gear. Not necessarily in the tech realm, but there's a lot of things where that applies.
Definitely more invested. So you take that responsibility on, and it means more.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. When you are investing your time and your money as opposed to being paid to do it, I think there's definitely a degree of taking it more seriously, maybe.
Okay, so now we're going to splice right in with the next question. You're just going to randomly have a cup of coffee suddenly. All right.
I don't think it matters. He's going to cut it and paste it with
That's
other
fine.
imagery
All right.
and whatever.
So this actually leads into a very good question when talking about the organized versus unorganized. If a group of people are coming together and making their own militia for training purposes, who does that group answer to? Is it the county? Is it the state? Who's the next authority in that chain of command?
Well, I would say that there's a couple of answers to that. One is that from a legal standpoint, it's pretty clear that the governor and the president both have the authority to activate the unorganized militia in time of need. But the other component to that is that, if we accept that this is a military organization, which it is, as per basically law in every state in the union as well as the federal law, these are military organizations. So military authority is always subject to civil authority. So I would say that militia always has to answer to government, at least on some level. But the other component to that is that militia, particularly unorganized militia, is made up of the whole body of the people. And that's one of the beautiful and I think crucial components of militia or force in arms in America, is that it's made up of the people. It's a volunteer force. You can't force a force to go to war if you don't have the broad support of the people. I think it would keep us out of a whole lot of frivolous wars that maybe we shouldn't be involved in if we had to take people away from their homes and families and jobs and careers and everything else in order to go to war, as opposed to having a massive standing army that's sitting around chomping at the bit waiting to go to war.
And actually, a fantastic point to be made here, I think, is that even outside of the context of an official call-up of the militia, If we have in a locality a group of people that are trained, organized, capable individuals, those people are an asset to their community. So if we have a natural disaster or any kind of event locally where we're going to need a relief effort to come in, I mean, just helping hands of any sort, you have a group of people that are already put together, that have already trained, and can then be utilized to be a service to their communities and their county.
Yeah, for sure. And that really hits home to a big part of the training model that Campbell County uses. I know Max, you guys are in the same boat. You lean really heavy on that component of it, which is that, like, ultimately we're just trying to make better citizens. One of the founders of CCM, Wes Gardner, always says that we're trying to build immediate responders, because immediate responders are better than first responders, because the immediate responders are all the people that are there when something bad happens. And ultimately that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to build world-class immediate responders, people that are all spun up on medical training, and they're spun up on how to handle anything from CPR and basic first aid, motor vehicle accidents, tornadoes, and anything else you can think of bad that might happen. An active shooter, really, you name it. If it's something bad that can happen, we want to be prepared to ultimately minimize the damage. And I know, Max, you guys are pretty heavy on that component of training to try to build better citizens.
It's a requirement, and really it's a duty. I mean, what kind of man are you if you're not taking that responsibility in your community, in your family, in your neighborhood? So
Absolutely.
Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, it's really a biblical principle, because I think that as biblical men, we have a responsibility to protect the weak and the innocent within our sphere of influence, which to me includes anywhere that I'm essentially geographically located. And so, yeah, as men, we should be trying to be better immediate responders. We should be protecting those within our sphere of influence. So, yeah, I think that should be one of the driving forces behind constitutional militia, is to be better citizens, be better immediate responders.
Mm-hmm. And your local county, your local community does keep you accountable too. It almost would police the militia by, if you get somebody that is in control or in leadership of the militia, and they start trying to do crazy stuff or spend crazy money on some ridiculous equipment,
Mm-hmm.
The community is not going to support that. They're not going to accept that.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to have that broad base of support you really need, since the militia needs to be of the community.
Yeah, it's
successful.
it's its own checks and balances system.
It really is,
just like everything else the country is built on. So, Marty, you actually, I think, moved right into one of the other things that continually comes up is how do we get support from our local government, which is kind of an interesting question, because when you consider the fact that with the historical context of the militia and how it is ingrained in America and in our founding, the idea that we have to get a local government to support something that is already inherently there is kind of an odd question, but yet it comes up continuously, and I think that just goes to show how much, how far away we have gotten from our founding documents and the principles that this country was founded on. So how do we go about getting support? I guess I'll just start off. Being a currently serving member on the Board of Supervisors for the county, here in Campbell County, we were very blessed to have a Board of Supervisors that is very pro Second Amendment, very supportive of the right to own firearms, and they understand the need of making better people and how much of an asset to the county a group of individuals like that can be. So we did not have near the hill to climb as many folks are going to run into in other states and localities that are far less friendly to our constitutional rights. So I guess I'd open up to either of you. Do you have any recommendations on how they go about finding the people on their board that are currently friendly to the Second Amendment, or how do they get their Board of Supervisors on board with that?
Right, and that is an excellent question. I do think that county recognition is important. It's not necessary, but I do consider it to be important. Appomattox has a fantastic relationship with your board of supervisors and with your county sheriff,
right.
but you're not formally recognized by resolution.
That's right.
I think close, right? I think there's been one proposed, but it hasn't been passed yet.
We've pushed for that, and then they've weighed the political costs and decided let's not go through with that.
Okay.
But it's something we're still working on. We think it's a valuable sign of that legitimacy that the community buy-in, and we're making progress. So.
But you made an excellent point, though. This is by no means something that you have to have. So you don't need permission
right.
from the government to practice your God-given rights and to organize, to practice those rights. So, yeah, people should not be deterred from forming a constitutional militia or participating in one simply because their local government is not friendly to it. It helps, and we want to get everyone to that point, but you don't have to have it.
Right, and it's a great recruiting tool if you can tell people, hey, we're formally recognized by our county government. But like anything else, when it comes to government, this is America. This is the great American experiment in self-governance. We're not asking government's permission to do or to exercise a God-given right. Now, do we want to ask for government's blessing? Yeah, we're asking for government's blessing. We're giving them an opportunity to have a seat at that table. But if they decline to take the seat, well, oh well. It's not like we're going to go, well, I guess we're not going to practice our God-given right because the Board of Supervisors said that they didn't want to. And Justin, what was that question originally? I know I had more to that, but I can't remember exactly what the question was.
Yeah, the question, as it was written, was how do we get local government support? I feel like we've answered that pretty adequately.
I almost think the question ought to be, how do you get your local community support? And I think one of the answers is education.
I mean, that's an excellent point. Yeah, I mean, is the government support what matters, or is it the support of the people that you were there to serve?
You get the support of
That's
the
a
support
fantastic
of the people,
point.
and then you change the government, and then bam.
Yeah, that's a very, very valid point. If your organization is everything that it should be, you will have community support. And if you have community support, why in the world would you not have government support? I think it's pretty easy for a community, especially, and that's part of the reason I think that doctrine of the lesser magistrate is so important, is because as a general rule in localities, in counties and small cities, I think that we as Americans still have influence and control over our elections. We can still verify that in our county or in our precinct in our county that we still have election integrity. And the vote spreads in those elections are drastically smaller, obviously, than what they are on a national level. And I think that we can still influence the outcome. Well, we can. And Justin, you're living proof that we can influence the outcome of our local elections if we're not happy with the job somebody's doing.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think we have a duty to participate in government more so than what I think what most Americans do is hey, I go vote when the election day comes up, but that's the end of my political involvement, which I absolutely understand. Anybody of sound mind generally wants to stay out of politics. That includes me. Just for to be clear, yeah, but we have a duty to be involved in that, and I think that's as our founding fathers originally saw government service. It was not meant to be a job for life. It was not meant to be something you even necessarily wanted to do, but you had a duty to participate in that and to serve your time there, to give back to your community, and then when you're done providing that service, you get to return back home and continue with the rest of your life and your normal job. Yeah, so it is absolutely important. You want to get support of your local government? Become your local government. Somebody has to do it. Why not you?
Yeah. That's
if you want to, instead of wondering who on my local board or my city council is friendly to me and my beliefs, well, I can guarantee you have somebody on the council that is friendly to your beliefs. If that somebody's you.
That's a very valid point. One other thing that I would say, that what we have found, at least in Campbell County, I think Appomattox, you guys are finding the same thing, that the key to this is it's networking. Basically, it's being able to tap other people's spheres of influence. So, if I want to stand up a militia in Campbell County, well, I may not know anyone on the Board of Supervisors, but I might know Marty, and I know that Marty has a really good relationship with his supervisors. So maybe I don't go to the board first. Maybe I go to Marty and say, hey, Marty, I watched this video. This really got some merits to it. I think we have a constitutional duty to do this. They've kind of paved the way in Central Virginia. Maybe this is something that we can make happen in this area, and then tap his sphere of influence. Because if I can get Marty on board, well, Marty knows the supervisor. Now he can talk to the two of us. Go and talk to the supervisor. Now we're heading in the right direction. If you don't have that kind of sphere of influence or rapport with your local elected officials, shame on you. You should build that sphere of influence. But B, the right place to start. At least in Virginia, you got all these counties that pass 2A sanctuary resolutions. I would look up, that's all public record, see if your county passed a resolution. If they did pass a resolution, see who voted for it. And I would talk to those people first. They're pro-Second Amendment. They should be pro-militia, right? Because that's what the Second Amendment is.
And I think you actually just answered one of the follow-up questions, which is, where do we start and who are the people that we are looking for? What do we need to get this thing running and off the ground? Which a lot of what you just said speaks to that point. There's certainly far more to it than that.
Before you get into that one, what do you have to say to the people that have a hostile city or county government, or even maybe a hostile community that is not going to be tolerant of traditional American duty?
Well,
in this context,
they're in America, so this is, the organization or the existence of constitutional militia is enshrined in American law all the way back, predating well before the Constitution was ratified, predating the Declaration of Independence, and quite honestly, you can trace it all the way back in, and I think, Marty, you were talking about that a minute ago off camera, you can trace it all the way back to English common law on the other side of the pond. So ultimately, if there's somebody that doesn't like it, and obviously in every community there's going to be some people. We've got people in this community that just cannot stand the fact that we're exercising our right and that we have constitutional militia. And ultimately, too bad. Like, who cares? You could have Christ himself here preaching that this was a good idea, and you'd still have a minimum of 20% of the population that would think it was a horrible idea and he's a bad person. So you're not going to keep everybody happy, and it is what it is. Now, there are going to be communities that are not like this one. They're going to be far less tolerant of it, and I just think that means that there's a little bit more uphill work to do as far as building rapport and building reputation, because we can't really deny or argue the fact that as soon as you hear the word militia, that's like the dirty M word. It might as well be a 4-letter word in a lot of places in America, and so we definitely have an uphill battle to rehabilitate that word and make it a household word again. And
we have to reclaim that word, refresh it, and put it back to closer to its original context and meaning and what it was supposed to be.
The enemies of our nation have spent a lot of money and time to dirty that word. Going back for what, 80, 100 years now?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, at least. Yeah. And, ultimately there's a reason that people want to demonize that organization and prevent it from existing, and it's because they fear the idea of the people actually having power in their hands. You got a whole lot of people in this country that are elitist that intend to rule, and anything that stands in the way of them being able to rule unchallenged, they're going to have a serious problem with. So, yeah, expect there to be some resistance.
Yeah. But again, it goes back to you have a duty to be involved, and if being involved in a militia or doing general firearms training, just being a self-reliant individual and being an asset, if you live in a community where that is frowned upon, I say continue to sally forth and conquer. You owe that to yourself, you owe that to your family to be that individual. And just continue to make those connections, build those relationships, and work on anybody that will listen.
Mm-hmm. Don't be afraid to network and make those relationships, because usually the people that are suffering under those situations are some of the most motivated to change them and to resist that.
Yeah.
There's truth to that for sure.